Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Flying Cat interview series. Today I have Marcos Sabino, who heads up SEO at TravelPerk, a B2B business travel software. He is originally from Portugal, spent the last 7 years in the UK, where he headed up the SEO team for MyProtein, an international sports nutrition brand. He's been in SEO for over 10 years, always working in-house for e-commerce companies. In January, he started working at TravelPerk, which is his first experience doing B2B SEO. And today we're going to be talking about SEO and the differences between B2C and B2B and ways to keyword mine. Hey, Marcos, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. It's really good to be able to be talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I've been seeing you online and also been following TravelPerk's growth, and I love the SEO that they're doing over there. So I'm really excited to get behind the scenes and see what's going on. So you went from e-commerce to B2B tech. Can you walk me through your background, your story there, and how that happened?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, I'm originally from Portugal and I worked for about 4 years at the sports nutrition company based in Portugal, but they also have an European reach. So, yeah, it was a startup when I joined, and I was kind of doing like a jack of all trades job. So, looking after social media, content, I was blogging as well. And that's where my contact with SEO came because I wanted my blog posts to be available in top positions in Google. So that's how I started my sort of career in SEO. And then I got a job offer to join this company, My Protein, in the UK. So spent my last 7 years in Manchester. So overall, yeah, most of my experience in SEO has been in e-commerce. And then, yeah, like you said, at the beginning of the year, moved to Barcelona, joined TravelPerk, which for people who don't know is a company that provides software for managing business travel. So everything from your booking, flights, accommodation, car rental, etc., to invoicing and everything in between. And yeah, it's a B2B environment. I'm liking the experience. I'm enjoying it. Obviously have different challenges, different problems to solve, which is gratifying because you get to learn a bit more.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's very different. I've always been in B2B, but I have dabbled a little bit with B2C. And while the SEO principles at the end of the day are the same, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. So before we get into the B2B part, tell me about how SEO works in e-commerce and how you scaled it at your last company.
So the company currently has like over 40 websites. I lost count when I was there. But when I joined, I only had 5 international websites and I was hired to head up the team. So I built the team from the ground up. It's more, everything is bigger in e-commerce, whether that's people, I'm talking usually, generally. So whether that's people, stakeholders, even search volumes and the number of indexable pages you have in e-com versus B2B is generally bigger. So yeah, you have to learn how to grow teams. Stakeholder management becomes really important because you have really a lot of people are asking stuff about performance, how we're going to grow, etc. You also have to do a lot more of training. So that's something that's a big difference to my experience in B2B because in e-commerce, so at least my experience, so you have a huge number of websites, you have trading managers, country managers, external writers that are all managing their own site. That means there are a lot of people with access to the site. So that
Mhm.
means the propensity for, making mistakes or making things to the side they're not really great for SEO and not advisable is also greater. So you have a lot more of this training and you have to be monitoring and you need to be educating people on best practices and please check with me before changing this on the site type of thing. Yeah, so I would say there is a lot of stakeholder management, and because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, you have to also provide a lot of constant training and education on SEO best practices.
That's actually something that I've also experienced in B2B, and I never thought about it verbally or never explained it in the way that you just did. When you first said stakeholder management, I was curious about what you meant. You explained it very well. So you're saying that there's a lot of people who are actually managing the websites, and they're going to go ahead and publish some pages saying, we need these pages. And you're like, wait, no, don't do it like that.
Exactly. Once a year, I spent 7 years there, but once a year, I would have to just review everything, all the pages on the site, and then I would find out there was this wild country manager for this specific country who had run like 10 offers per week on separate pages, and then at the end of the year, you can imagine the number of pages that are not really doing it a lot. They were used this once for one email campaign and never again touched. So that kind of thing that you encountered a lot.
From your experience in working in e-commerce and B2C, how are the challenges different from what you're doing in B2B tech?
Yeah, so as I said before, I feel like everything in e-commerce is bigger, regardless of what we're talking about. So one thing is really different. So like I said, there's more people you have to sort of control, not a good word, monitor, let's say that. A lot more people you have to monitor. And if you look at also things like automation, at least this is my experience, because previously in e-commerce, it was a big company with lots of people. The company had, I don't know the exact count now, but we're talking about over 10,000 employees overall, not just the brand I was working for. At TravelPerk, I think we are 500. We may be more now. So yeah, in terms of scale, things are different. And automation, there was a lot of automation in e-commerce because you can't really change. If you're doing like internal redirect cleanup or something like that, you can't really do that across 40 websites manually. And so you have to rely a lot on automation and in implementing things that will make your life easier. I'm not saying that you don't need automation for SaaS companies. That's not what I'm saying, but it's probably one area that you feel a bit of difference. So now there's fewer people that have access to the site, and so it's easier to control and don't lose track of what's happening on the site. It's also fewer people that you have to educate on SEO best practices, which makes it a lot easier to make sure that everything that happens on the site actually goes by me first. There's no really big surprises there. I don't encounter things, I don't know where this has come from. So in that sense, for me, it's a bit easier to actually do all the management of things. People know, your marketing team already knows that, okay, if we are making a change to anything on the site, if we're going to publish new stuff, remove stuff, let's get the SEO guy in the room as well, because he'll be happy about it. So yeah, in that sense, it's easier in terms of control and monitoring. Another big difference is the search volumes as well. So just the demand for your MVP keywords is a lot different. So when I was in e-commerce, we sold sports supplements, and there's a wide array of sports supplements. In the US, if you think about the flagship category, protein supplements, the search volumes are like over 100,000 searches per month, which is huge. So you can imagine everything around protein supplements, the why, the what's, the how questions would also have a significant search. When you are at the SaaS environment, and again, I'm talking about my personal experience, typically the search volumes are a lot lower. Your core keywords, your biggest money keywords might be in the region of thousands as opposed to hundreds of thousands, which also means that everything else, all the long tail keywords, all the questions you want to answer about the different areas of the product, will also have smaller search volumes, which bring us to a few differences and a few challenges that I didn't personally experience in e-commerce. You encounter a lot more of the zero search volume keywords, for example, which wasn't really something I had to worry a lot before, but I found it that here in B2B tech, I do tend to find those a bit more. Also, the keyword volumes are a bit off, and a lot of the times what the SEO tools do, they massively underestimate the real demand there is for some keywords. So those are a couple of real challenges. And then I'm thinking about English speaking markets, so English keywords. So if it's hard to get information on keywords, search volumes on keywords for the English language, you can only imagine how it's if you move over to non-English markets. So at TravelPerk, we work with Germany, France, and Spain, and those are quite big languages worldwide. I can only imagine what it will be like if you start moving to smaller languages or languages that are spoken by fewer amount of people, I think that will also exacerbate the problem. These are typically the biggest differences I've seen in the field.
So you mentioned that the challenge is that the search volume is lower, but that's going to be normal in B2B. Is it challenging because you want to see a lot more traffic, you want to get it to higher numbers, or because it's another form of stakeholder management where you're saying, okay, B2B, we're not going to hit these kind of numbers, but obviously the value of the purchase is going to be more. What part of that makes it more challenging?
Yeah, I think for me, it was a change in the mindsets, because obviously
Yeah.
coming from e-commerce with lots of categories, I was used to my protein. I don't know the exact numbers now, but the kind of organic traffic we're getting to the sites overall, when it was over 1 million organic sessions, obviously you don't get those volumes in SaaS companies. So to me, it was a matter of changing the ship, that mindset. And obviously when you could do something in e-commerce and you'd get an increase of 20,000 organic sessions per month, but in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it's barely noticeable. But if you increase your sessions by 20,000 in SaaS environments, that's quite a lot. So to me, it was just the mindset, changing that mindset.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, like you said, yeah, the keywords will be potentially more specific. They will be more tied into the product and to the stuff you sell.
When you joined TravelPerk in January, did you guys already have a pretty strong SEO culture? Did you have to do a lot of education to the stakeholders there?
So they had been doing some SEO, mostly on the content side of things. So they had been publishing some guides and blog articles. There wasn't like a strong thought process in terms of SEO. Let's follow an SEO first approach. As far as I know, there wasn't anyone like doing keyword research or looking at volumes, or they were doing, but in a like a basic state, not really doing like some sort of competitor analysis or keyword mining in Search Console or anything like that. But there was already a mindset that SEO is important. And the figures also show that SEO is important because it's the channel that drives the most amount of traffic. I think the kind of training and education I had to do was more about implementing certain processes, the different teams. And now there's a guy who is like a control freak, and he wants to know everything that goes on the site, and he wants to be able to give feedback before we put things live on site. So it's more about that, and then explaining why is it important that the images have a certain size, certain dimension. Why is it important that when we're building a page, we actually need to think about how this will be fit into the website structure, and do we put it in navigation, etc. So it's more about these sort of
Okay.
different things, that I have to implement.
And you also talked about zero search volume keywords. I'm curious about what's your take on those? Do
Yeah,
you like
yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and one that I've been seeing brought up a lot more on LinkedIn by several SEO professionals, including yourself. And yeah, I never worried about zero search volume keywords before, to be honest, because there was such a vast amount of keywords for me to worry about that had actual volumes that I didn't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
But here, because obviously we're talking about a smaller volume pool, I encountered those a lot more. And it's very frequent, very common to look at the Search Console, look at the keywords that are driving traffic to the site, or keywords that we have lots of impressions for but no clicks. And then when I plot those in any SEO tool, SEMrush, such metrics, you don't really find volumes associated with those keywords. NA, that's what you get, or even around zero. And it's interesting to see, because sometimes the differences, the real difference, the real volume available based on what we see from Search Console, it's really significant. You might be talking about keywords that, according to SEO tools, third-party SEO tools, have no demand, but then you look at what you're actually getting through Search Console, 400, 500, 1,000. It's really interesting. And yeah, that's something that I've found here a
Yeah.
lot.
So you did mention, now we're going to go into that Google Search Console mining. What is that about? How do you do that?
Search Console should be any SEO's best friend, always say. And what I found is that's even more true if you're working in B2B SaaS, because you have to rely a lot. There's a lot of information that you have on Search Console that is not available on your third-party SEO tools. Yeah, so some of the things that I like to do is, I think, first of all, you always need to, if you're joining a new company, you need to get a good understanding of the product that you have. That means talking to product marketing people and that look after the different areas of the product, so you can understand what the platform does, the different specificities about the product. Because even though the product is one thing, but inside your product, you tackle different problems, very different specific problems. So you need to understand what the main themes are and in what way do we help customers, users. And then you take down notes, and then you start forming your clusters, your topic clusters, this type of stuff that you then will need to do some digging about. Get PPC data. Very first thing I do, any company, to help understand what your money keywords are, the keywords that you really want to focus on. Typically, any company will already be running ads, so you should be able to get that information. And then from there, once you have the understanding, you do your traditional keyword research. And then more specifically on Search Console, some of the things I did was, so actually an interesting story. When I was interviewing for TravelPerk, obviously you go and check what's the search visibility like, what kind of keywords you rank for. And when I actually got access to TravelPerk Search Console, I was like baffled, because the amount of traffic, the estimated traffic that I was getting from the SEO tools was like 3-4 times smaller than what the actual traffic
Really?
was.
Yeah.
And that kind of immediately draw the attention to the differences in such volumes. So yeah, I was able to get a better understanding what the real volume of keywords available. One thing that I like to do is to check for keywords that have higher impressions, a high number of impressions in Search Console, but then have virtually no clicks. So we know that in order for Search Console to register an impression, our result needs to appear on the first page. So we know that we have content that is good enough to appear on Google's first page, but it might be lingering around position 7, 8, 9, 10, which can mean that, okay, we can have content servicing this query. It's close enough to the intent, but it's not quite spot on the intent.
Yeah.
So it might be a matter of, okay, we actually now need to, okay, is this content good enough for me to just add what's missing, or do I need a new piece? A lot of the times, these very long tail keywords, these keywords that have zero such volume in SEO tools, but then you look at Search Console and there's actually demand for it, they don't really warrant a full piece, a full article, because most of the times they are about a very specific problem. So maybe it will work if you just add that information to the existing guide that is ranking, or the existing blog post. And that's something I've seen a considerable amount of success with. Literally, sometimes it's just you had a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs on that thing, and that ranking page goes up in the rankings, because it was just that bit of information that was missing. And then other times it might mean that, okay, the content is close enough but not spot on the intent, and in which case you do need to publish a new article. But those are things that I've seen a big amount of success from doing that. It's really a gold mine of information that you have in Search Console. And it allows you to find these opportunities that elsewhere you wouldn't be able to find them. If I didn't have Search Console, and if I only relied on tools like SEMrush or Searchmetrics, there would be a lot of content, middle, bottom of the funnel content, high intent, that you would be missing out on. I think it's absolutely important to look at Search Console relevant in a frequent way. One thing that I also like to do, and I would advise, I don't like to work on the Search Console platform like directly. It's very clunky. I prefer to use Data Studio. So this is something I would advise to any SEO professional. Just create your different tables and charts and whatnot on Data Studio. One thing a couple of charts that I have is the keyword table, and then you can set it to week on week, month, whatever. So you can spot trends. So whenever you publish something and then you want to be monitoring, if you see a keyword, you can do this either keywords or landing pages, but if you spot one of those keywords or landing pages going up in number of impressions by great number percent. Okay, you then want to have a look and see, okay, what's actually driving this. So the impressions are going massively up, but your clicks aren't anywhere near. Your click-through rate and average position are, virtually the same. So there's something going on here. And then you can go there and understand, okay, as Google suddenly started ranking us for some new queries that, we talk about that, but not quite. So that's a good opportunity to spot up and coming keywords or URLs, something that I always like to do. I think it can be useful also after a Google update or whenever there's a major update announced by Google. If you see a drop, you can also understand what kind of keywords have dropped. That's another difference to the area where I was working. I don't feel like the Google updates have a major impact in organic rankings in tech. Before I was working in what Google calls your money, your life pages, because it was about health and nutrition, and so things that can really impact your well-being. So it was more sensitive to these updates, especially Medic. That was a big one, great experience, which we can chat some other time, where the website got like the traffic got wiped like 60%, but then we got it back. It has a happy ending, but yeah, some other time maybe. But as I was saying, I think those charts that you can build in search in a data studio can give you more information about whenever you have drops, for example, or even when you improve, why not?
This is so interesting. And I was curious about how frequently, what's your system for going through Google Search Console and saying, okay, I'm going to be updating these pages every month, every quarter. Do you have a system for that?
I don't have a set system, so I'm not going to tell you, yeah, it's every X months, because that's just part of one of the things we do in SEO. Then we also have to worry about link building and technical SEO and implementing new stuff on the site. So I don't really have a set time frame to do that. Obviously, when I joined TravelPerk, that's all. I did a very extensive research to try and understand, okay, where the opportunities are, and then we just do it like maybe every quarter. Might not exactly be every quarter or so. We then start looking at, you start getting this traffic, you start getting leads being generated by this new amount of traffic, MQLs, SQLs, and whatnot, and then you want to optimize the content that is driving the highest number of MQLs and SQLs, because at the end of the day, that's what we want as a business.
Definitely.
Getting demos through the door and signups. So yeah, that's something we actively track, what we call like our SQL keywords. So every keyword that's ended up generating an SQL, and we get that from PPC data regularly on a quarterly basis. We always refine that list, fine-tune that list. So that's the kind of content that gets our attention the most. It might not be on a quarterly basis, but yeah, it's more often than every other piece of content that we go there. And I do the same, I apply the same exercise basically. Okay, let's assume that the on-page and the technical is already in place. What else is missing on this piece of content? What else is this? Which keywords are driving like impressions for this article, but not clicks, and what we can do to improve upon that.
Do you have an example of how you used Google Search Console mining for TravelPerk and what the results of that were?
An example, a good example, for example, could be, so our corporate travel policy guide, for example. So that's one of the bigger keywords in our industry. If you now go on our corporate travel policy guide, you can see there's a lot of other policies that are related to travel. So before we had published all of these different sub guides, we only had a travel policy guide, which was harboring all of these different keywords around travel policies and how you write one. But within a corporate travel policy, there's different needs. So the travel policy might be different between departments. Maybe your salespeople need different rules for travel. Maybe your consultants, because they travel more, they need different rules as well. The travel policy for a nonprofit might be different as well. Your C-suite, your executives might have different rules to the common employee. So we started looking into this, and there was demand, barely any demand in SEO tools, but there was demand in Search Console. So this one main guide about corporate travel policies was actually showing a lot of these keywords, executive travel policy or travel policies for nonprofits, stuff like that. So that allowed us to build up this guide. And then over time, obviously now, whereas before, if you search for travel policy for executives, Google would serve the main guide, which didn't really talk about executives specifically, but it talked about policies. But now you get the very specific bespoke article for this. And this is an approach that we followed across other guides that we also have. I think this one is the better example because there is a lot of information and keywords volume around this topic. So that was one example. Another example can also be interesting to share is, so we've trialed with, I start seeing in Search Console a lot of the localized keywords, things like business travel plus a city, for example. And we actually went on and created different localized pages for this. So the challenge there, or the questions I had there was, can we rank for these localized queries, business travel in London, corporate travel in San Francisco, whatever, even though we don't have a physical address in all of these locations? Can we still, create a page that is relevant enough to show up for these queries? And we've had some pockets of success with that by doing that. So the answer is yes, we can rank. We are ranking for a few pages for which we don't have any physical address. Like when I say ranking, like top positions. So that was another example of something that I got mostly from Search Console, because if you search for these keywords, like SEMrush is the tool that I use the most, you have some keywords, and then for the most part, the number is 10, 20, and then you look at Search Console. No, it's actually a lot more than that, 10 times more. So that's another example. We put the Search Console thing into practice.
You make me really excited to go into Search Console and look for this information in this way. It seems like there's so much opportunities. And I found the same. The search volume on those third-party tools are always underrepresented, and there's always a lot more opportunity. And even I found for some clients, we tried to rank for, normally we go for low volume keywords. We do B2B SaaS as well. And it says an estimate of 40 searches per month. We get thousands of clicks a month. And then in other kind of keywords where it had an estimated search volume of 1,500, since it took months to rank for that because it was more competitive, we ended up getting 11 clicks. So the search volume on those third-party tools means very little at the end of the day, especially, I guess, in B2B tech.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And another thing that we use a lot, so going on the international sites, do you guys produce content or do SEO for non-English markets?
Yes.
Yes, as well.
Less, but yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And it is definitely even lower.
Yeah, exactly. So we like to do, so in an ideal world, you have an SEO native speaker for each one of these languages, and they can do the work themselves. And so you have that problem. Non-English markets, the volumes there are even lower or non-existent. But then you might have an additional problem is when you don't actually speak the language yourself. So that adds insult to injury. But one thing that has worked with us is we go ahead and we publish. So we translate and we try and localize it the best possible way, a guide or a landing page. Even the search SEMrush or search metrics aren't really showing volumes for the translated version of this page. We go ahead and publish it. That's something you can do. And then just wait a few weeks for the impressions to start coming through. And then you refine it. And then you find out that, actually, this keyword that SEMrush told me has got 0 searches a month. It's actually has 100 or 200 or whatever. And then you can actually refine the keywords that I've used on the page isn't actually the most popular one, or is not really searched this way much. So that's another example where you can use Search Console to actually refine the pages on a constant basis. That's a good example where we've used it for non-English sites as well, and it works pretty well.
Great. This has been very educational and helpful, and thank you so much for sharing your time with me today, Marcos.
It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me just say that I follow you on LinkedIn as well, and I think you do great work in sharing a lot of the very practical tips about SEO. And I think we need that. I think we need to talk about the brilliant basics, because I used to have a manager who was always saying it's the brilliant basics that matter. It mattered 10 years ago, they matter today, and they will continue on mattering. And yeah, the practical tips, the tactical tips you provide, those are very good. So yeah, I think you do a great job in
Thank you.
getting the word out.
Thanks. That's nice of you saying. Yeah, definitely it's important to spread the education about how SEO works so people outside of it understand how it ties into their goals as well and everybody's goals in the company. This has been a lot of fun. If people want to talk more about this topic to you or get to know you a little better, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, my favorite social media is LinkedIn. It's where I spend most of my time on. Actually reading stuff, not scrolling down on Facebook. So yeah, if you just search for my name, Marcos Sabino, in LinkedIn, and feel free to connect. I'll be more than happy to connect. That'll be the best place.
Excellent. This has been a pleasure. For anybody who was listening or watching to this and also enjoyed it, please drop a comment and let us know that you've watched it and enjoyed it. Give it a like, share, subscribe, and go follow Marcos. Connect with him on LinkedIn. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Good one.